Hi everyone, just coming in at the beginning of this episode. Just as a little programming note, at the very, very, very end of this episode, so I'd say like the last, 2.5 minutes, there is a little bit of a delay on my end, which makes it difficult for Mikel to hear what I am saying. So there is going to be some overlapping. It does appear as Mikel is talking over me. He doesn't even know that I was talking. So just as a programming note, it's at the very end. So yeah, that's kind of it. Enjoy this episode.
What's up, everyone? This is the Next Day Podcast, episode 92, with Mikel, and
And Tanyka.
where we have conversations on different topics. We're doing a episode based on a former president at the United States. We did one earlier this year on Barack Obama. Um, so what's the next former president are we doing, Tanika?
We're going to be talking about John F. Kennedy.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
let's go.
All right. So, John F. Kennedy, who was born on May 29th,
Mm-hmm,
1917 in I think it's Brookline or Brooklyn, Massachusetts, and died November 22nd, 1963 in
mm-hmm,
Dallas, Texas, was the 35th president of the United States from 1961 to 1963, so he only did 2 years, who faced a number of foreign crises, especially in Cuba and Berlin, but managed to secure such achievements as the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and the Alliance for Progress. He was assassinated while riding in a motorcade in Dallas. So he is the second of 9 children, and just as this is to kind of go into the future a little bit, he's not going to be the only one that we're going to be talking about, the only Kennedy we're going to be talking about in the future. We're going to talk about a Kennedy in the future who probably not a lot of people know about. So just, but he's the second of 9 children, and Kennedy was reared in a family that demanded intense physical and intellectual competition among the siblings. The family's touch football games at their Highness Sport Retreat later became legendary and was schooled in the religious teaching of the Roman Catholic Church and the political precepts of the Democratic Party.
mm-hmm.
So he's the better Kennedy. Yeah, I said it. Um, okay. So, his father, Joseph Patrick Kennedy, had acquired a multi-million-dollar fortune in banking, bootlegging. Well,
So, sorry,
yeah.
that was my alarm. My bad.
Okay.
But
Um, yeah, so bootlegging, which I'm not 100% sure what bootlegging is, shipbuilding and the film industry. So he did everything as a skilled player of the stock market as well. His
damn.
mother, Rose, was the daughter of John F.
Uh-huh.
Honeyfitz Fitzgerald, one-time mayor of Boston. After serving as the head of Securities and Exchange Commission, Joseph Kennedy became the U.S. ambassador to Great Britain. And for 6 months in 1963, John served as his secretary, drawing on the experience to write his senior thesis at Harvard University on Great Britain's military unpreparedness. Dang.
Hmm.
He then expanded that thesis into a best-selling book, Why England Slept. Wow, 1940. I mean, I don't know that because I feel like this was like right before World War II. Um, I don't, I don't know England's response with the war.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to, I mean, I think they tried, but you know, I don't have a lot of knowledge there. Anyway, in the fall of 1941, Kennedy joined the U.S. Navy, and 2 years later was sent to the South Pacific. By the time he was discharged in 1945, his older brother Joe,
Mm.
who their father expected would be the first Kennedy to run for office, had been killed in the war. So this is the older brother of John F. Kennedy. And the family's political standard passed to John, who had planned to pursue an academic or journalistic career. John Kennedy himself had barely escaped death in battle, commanding a patrol torpedo boat. He was gravely injured when a Japanese destroyer sank in the Solomon Islands, which is something that definitely carried with him through to his presidency. It would be later known. This is me saying this, not notes. It would kind of be later known that he definitely battled with maybe some form of substance abuse or something kind of going on to kind of combat the pain. He never really came forward with the fact that he was in immense pain. I guess because it would have made him look weak. I don't know. Um, so marooned far behind enemy lines, he led his men back to safety and was awarded the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism. So he has that. He also returned to active command at his own request, uh, which I guess, I don't know, I feel like people do that. I don't think that's necessarily, oh my God, he went back on his own request. I think people sometimes do choose to go back to war. So I don't think that's like crazy.
Mhm.
Um, However, the further injury to his back, which had bothered him since his teens, never really healed, despite operations in 1944, 1954, and 1955. He was in pain for much of the rest of his life. He also suffered from Addison disease. Um, Again, don't I know it causes a lot of pain, but don't know a lot of knowledge there. Though this affliction was publicly concealed. Quote, at least one half of the days he spent on this earth, wrote his brother Robert, were days of intense physical pain. After he became president, Kennedy combated the pain with injections of antihistamines, then thought to be harmless and used by more than a few celebrities for their energizing effect. According to some reports, both Kennedy and the First Lady became heavily dependent on these injections through weekly use. So, both of them. None of this prevented Kennedy from undertaking a strenuous life in politics. His family expected him to run for public office and expected him to win, which, spoiler alert, he did.
Uh-huh.
So we're never going to step into him being congressman and a senator. So Kennedy did not disappoint his family. In fact, he never lost an election. His first opportunity came in 1946 when he ran for Congress. Although still physically weak from his war injuries, he campaigned aggressively by passing the Democratic organization in the Massachusetts 11th Congressional District and depending instead upon his family, college friends, and fellow Navy officers, I guess, to help with, you know, paying for the campaign. In the Democratic primary, he received nearly double the vote of his nearest opponent. In the November election, he overwhelmed the Republican candidate. He was only 29 at the time, so that's great. Kennedy served 3 terms in the House of Representatives from 1947 to 1953. As a bread and butter liberal, he
Mhm.
advocated better working conditions, more public housing,
Mhm.
higher wages, lower prices, cheaper rents, and more social security for the aged. That sounds fantastic.
Right.
In foreign policy, he was an early supporter of the Cold War policies. He backed the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, but was sharply critical of the Truman administration's record in Asia. He accused the State Department of trying to force, I might butcher this, so bear with me, Chiang Kai-shek into a coalition with Mao Zedong, I think is how you say it. Quote, what our young men had saved, he told the House on January 25th, 1949, our diplomats and our president have frittered away. His congressional district in Boston was a safe seat, but Kennedy was too ambitious to remain long in the House of Representatives. In 1952, he ran for the U.S. Senate. against the popular incumbent Henry Cobot Lodge Jr. His mother and sisters, Eunice, Patricia, and Jean, held Kennedy teas across the state. Thousands of volunteers flocked to help, including his 27-year-old brother Robert, who managed the campaign. That fall, the Republican presidential candidate, General Dwight D. Eisenberg, carried Massachusetts by 208,000 votes, but Kennedy defeated Lodge by 70,000 votes, so an extra 70,000 on top of that. Less than a year later, on September 12, 1953, Kennedy enhanced his electoral appeal by, sorry, let me find my spot here, by marrying Jacqueline Lee Bover, or as we know her, Jackie O,
Mhm.
12 years younger than Kennedy was, and from a socially prominent family. The beautiful Jackie was the perfect complement to the handsome politician. They made a glamorous couple, as we know. Of course, he wouldn't be faithful, but anyways,
Mhm.
as a senator, Kennedy quickly won a reputation for responsiveness to requests from constituents, except on certain occasions when the national interest was at stake. In 1954, he was the only New England senator to approve an extension of the President Eisenhower's reciprocal trade powers, and he vigorously backed the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway, despite the fact that over a period of 20 years, no Massachusetts senator or congressman had ever voted for it. To the disappointment of liberal Democrats, Kennedy soft-pedaled the demagogic excess of Senator
Mhm.
Joseph R. McCarthy of Wisconsin, who in the early 1950s conducted witch hunting campaigns. Okay, like, I'm sorry. This is we're in the 20th century. We should know better at this point. But anywho's, against government workers accused of being communists. Kennedy's father liked McCarthy, contributed to his campaign, and even entertained him in the family's compound at Hyannisport on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Kennedy himself disapproved of McCarthy, but as he once observed, quote, half my people in Massachusetts look on McCarthy as a hero. Yet on the Senate vote over condemnation of McCarthy's conduct, Kennedy expected to vote against him. He prepared a speech explaining why, but he was absent. So um, later at a National Press Club graduate dinner, costumed reporters saying, "Where were you, John? Where were you?" Actually, John had been in a hospital in critical condition after back surgery. So one of his many back surgeries. This was, I think, in 1954. So he would have had back surgery during that time. For 6 months afterward, he lay strapped to a board in his father's house in Palm Beach, Florida. It was during this time that he worked on Profiles in Courage, and account of 8 great American political leaders who had defied popular opinion in matters of conscience, which was awarded a Pulitzer Prize. So, yeah, he's doing it all, I guess, while he's laid up in bed recovering from back surgery. Because I hear
Mhm.
back surgery is horrible surgery to recover from. So, um, so let me just pass that there. So back in the Senate, Kennedy, what I keep calling him Kennedy led a fight against a proposal to abolish the Electoral College, crusaded for labor reforms, and became increasingly committed to civil rights legislation, which I think was probably one of the reasons, if not the main reason, that he would be assassinated later in life. As a member of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations in the late 1950s, he advocated extensive foreign aid to the emerging nations in Africa and Asia, and he surprised his colleagues by calling upon France to grant people from Algerians, independence, which I guess at this point they hadn't yet had. They do now, but I don't know if they did at the time. I guess not. During these years, his political outlook was moving leftward, possibly because of their father's dynamic personality. The sons of Joseph Kennedy matured slowly. Gradually, John's stature among Democrats grew until he inherited the legions that had once followed Governor Adlai E. Stevenson of Illinois, the two-time presidential candidate who, by appealing to idealism, had transformed the Democratic Party and made Kennedy's rise possible. So now we're stepping into his presidency.
Mm,
Kennedy had nearly become Stevenson's vice presidential running mate in 1956. The charismatic young New Englander's near victory was his televised speech of concession brought him into some 40 million American homes. Overnight, he had become one of the best known political figures in the country. Already, his campaign for the 1960 nomination had begun. One newspaperman called him a young man in a hurry. Kennedy felt that he had to redouble his efforts because of the widespread conviction that no Roman Catholic candidate could be elected president. Interesting. That's interesting. I wonder what religion they expect then. If, like, I know there's many different religions in America, but it's just why? Anyway, he made his 1958 race for re-election to the Senate a test of his popularity in Massachusetts. His margin of victory was 874,608 votes, the largest ever in Massachusetts politics, and the greatest of any senatorial candidate that year. So a steady stream of speeches and periodical profiles followed with photographs of him and his wife appearing on many a magazine cover. So there's the popularity starting to build up. Kennedy's carefully calculated pursuit of the presidency years before the first primary established a practice that became the norm for candidates seeking the nation's highest office. To transport him and his staff around the country, his father bought a 40-passenger Convair aircraft. So weird as buying planes. Okay. His brothers Robert and Edward pitched in. So after having graduated from Harvard University and from the University of Virginia Law School, Robert, had embarked on a career as a Justice Department attorney and counselor for congressional committees.
mm.
So, like this family just doesn't stop. Some of them maybe should, but it just doesn't stop. They're crazy. Anyway, and then Edward, he would be up and shit. So in January 1960, John F. Kennedy formally announced his presidential candidacy. His chief rivals were the Senators Hubert H. Humphrey of Minnesota and Lyndon B. Johnson of Texas. So it's very interesting. The man who would become his vice president actually was running against him initially. Kennedy knocked Humphrey out of the campaign and dealt the religious taboo against Roman Catholics a blow by winning the primary in Protestant West Virginia. He tackled the Catholic issue again by avowing his belief in the separation of church and state in a televised speech before a group of Protestant ministers in Houston, Texas. Nominated on the first ballot, he balanced the Democratic ticket by choosing Johnson as his running mate. So Lyndon Johnson here is probably like, I'm not going to win. So they joined forces. In his acceptance speech, Kennedy had declared, quote, we stand together. Sorry, I just don't know if I was spell here yet. We stand today on the edge of a new frontier. Thereafter, the phrase new frontier was associated with his presidential programs. Another phrase, the Kennedy style, encapsulated the candidate's emerging identity. It was glamorous and elitist and amalgam of his father's wealth, John Kennedy's charisma and easy wit, Jacqueline Kennedy's beauty and fashion sense, the charm of their children and relatives, and the erudition of the Harvard advisors who surrounded him. So, like, yeah. Kennedy won the general election narrowly, defeating the Republican candidate, Vice President Richard M. Nixon, by a margin of less than 120,000 out of some 70,000 votes cast. Many observers then and since believed vote fraud contributed to Kennedy's victory. So it's interesting. I never knew that. That was something that was being talked about. especially in the critical state of Illinois, where Joe Kennedy enlisted the help of ever-powerful Richard B. Daley, or Jay Daley, mayor of Chicago. For what? Why are you enlisting his help? For what?
Mhm.
That's weird. Anyway, Nixon had defended the Eisenhower record. Kennedy, whose slogan had been "Let's get this country moving again." Ooh. I don't like these slogans. I don't like these slogans.
What slogans that you don't like?
Ah, I mean, let's get this country moving again. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but anytime I hear slogans like this now, it just it
Like,
takes
is
away.
it similar? Like,
It sounds like "Let's make America great again." That's what it literally sounds like. But maybe that's just honestly, I think like
I mean,
making America great again,
mhm.
if it was said by someone different, maybe I would be okay, you know? But because it's who it's said by, I'm just like, "Ooh, yeah." And I don't know, maybe this is more me and I'm putting too much thought into it. But it's just, I don't know. Oh,
Mhm.
I liked Obama's. That was fine. It is, I don't know. I don't remember Biden having a slogan. Um,
Yeah.
I don't remember if he
Mm.
did.
He did have a slogan, but it
He did.
wasn't. He just had it like he wasn't really
It wasn't like
basically.
a popular slogan or something people I guess were
Yeah.
saying. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Mm.
anyway,
Every president has their slogan. Even our prime minister has a slogan. You look at Pierre changes his slogan every single time. I don't know why, but
who
I
does?
just
Who?
Pierre Poilievre, he changes his slogan all the time.
Yeah, well, that's another reason why I don't trust him.
Yeah,
I don't trust him. Anyways, um,
yeah,
yeah, no, we definitely have slogans, but
yeah,
I don't know. Okay, well, that's just, I think it's just me.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, he deplored unemployment, the sluggish economy, the so-called missile gap. Um, so that was kind of what he was kind of dealing with.
Hmm.
Oh, and the new communist government in Havana, because
Hmm.
what Cuba's always had their or I should say, states in Cuba always had their issues. Um, a major factor in the campaign was a unique series of four televised debates between the two men. See, God, they had four. We had one to enjoy this past this election. Jeez, technically two. Technically two. I understand. Anyway, an estimated 85 to 120 million Americans watched one or more of the debates. Both men showed a firm grasp of the issues, but Kennedy's poise in front of the camera, his Tony Harvard accent, and his good looks, in contrast to Nixon's 5 o'clock shadow, that's so mean, convinced many viewers that he had won the debate. As president, Kennedy continued to exploit the new medium, sparking in precedent-setting televised weekly um like I guess like he would show up do TV things weekly um which okay, like that's new. I don't know how many presidents would do that. So okay, he was the youngest man and the first Roman Catholic ever elected to the presidency of the United States. His administration lasted 1,037 days. From the onset, he was concerned with foreign affairs. In his memorable inaugural address, he called upon Americans, quote, to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle against the common enemies of Maine. Um, so tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. So the administration's first brush with foreign affairs was a disaster. In the last year of the Eisenhower presidency, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, had equipped and trained a barrage of anti-communist Cuban exiles for an invasion of their homeland. The Joint Chiefs of Staff unanimously advised the new president that this force, once ashore, would spark a general uprising against the Cuban leader, so the Fidel Castro. So I guess they're kind of like not telling him the full thing or not being fully truthful. But the Bay of Pigs invasion was a fiasco. Every man on the beachhead was either killed or captured. Kennedy assumed sole responsibility for the setback. Privately, he told his father that he would never again accept a Joint Chiefs recommendation without first challenging it. The
Mm.
Soviet premier, Nikita, oh boy, Khrushchev, okay, thought he had taken the young president's measure when the two leaders met in Vienna in June 1961. I don't call him Nikita because I cannot say his last name. Ordered a wall built between East and West Berlin and threatened to sign a separate peace treaty with East Germany. The president activated National Guard and reserve units, and Nikita backed down on his separate peace threat. Kennedy then made a dramatic visit to West Berlin, where he told a cheering crowd, quote, "Today in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is Ich bin in, I am a," that's what it is in English, Berliner. In October 1962, a buildup of Soviet short and intermediate range nuclear missiles were discovered in Cuba. Well, what is it doing there? Kennedy demanded that the missiles be dismantled. He ordered a quarantine of Cuba. What is going on in Cuba? You know what? Don't answer that. In effect, a blockade that would stop Soviet ships from reaching that island. For 13 days, nuclear war seemed near. Then the Soviet premier announced that the offensive weapons would be withdrawn. 10 months later, Kennedy scored his greatest foreign triumph when Nikita and Prime Minister Harold Macmillan of Great Britain joined him in signing the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Yet Kennedy's commitment to combat the spread of communism led him to escalate American involvement in the conflict in Vietnam, where he sent not just supplies and financial assistance as President Eisenhower, um, sorry, offensive weapons would be withdrawn, blah, blah, blah. Eisenhower, okay, so President Eisenhower had, but 15,000 military advisors as well. So, yeah. Because of his slender victory in 1960, Kennedy approached Congress warily and with good reason. Congress was largely indifferent to the legislative program. It appeared his approved his Alliance for Progress in Latin America and his Peace Corps, which won the enthusiastic endorsement of thousands of college students. But his two most cherished projects, massive income tax cuts and a sweeping civil rights measure, were not passed until after his death. In May 1961, Kennedy committed the United States to land a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And while he would not live to see this achievement either, his advocacy of the space program contributed to the successful launch of the first American manned space flights. He was immensely popular president at home and abroad. At times, he seemed to be everywhere at once, encouraging better physical fitness, improving the morale of government workers, bringing brilliant advisors to the White House, and beautifying Washington, D.C. His wife joined him as an advocate for American culture. Their two young children, Carolyn Bouvier and John F. Jr., were familiar throughout the country. The charm and optimism of the Kennedy family seemed contagious, sparking the idealism of a generation for whom the Kennedy White House became, in journalist Theodore White's famous analogy, um, uh, hold on, Camlet, the magical court of Arthurian legend, which is celebrated in a popular Broadway musical of the early 1960s. Joseph Kennedy, meanwhile, had been encapsulated in Hyannisport by a stroke, but the other Kennedys were in and out of Washington. Robert, I think Joseph Kennedy, that's his father.
Mhm.
Um, Robert Kennedy, as John's attorney general, was the second most powerful man in the country. Yeah, and his offspring wouldn't leave us alone either. He advised the president on all matters of foreign and domestic policy, national security, and political affairs. In 1962, Ted Kennedy was elected to the president's former Senate seat in Massachusetts. Their sister Eunice's husband, Sergeant Shriver, became director of the Peace Corps. Their sister Jean's husband, Stephen Smith, was preparing to manage the Democratic Party's 1964 presidential campaign. Another sister, Jesus, Patricia, had
Mhm.
married Peter Lawford, an English-born actor who served the family as an unofficial envoy to the entertainment world. All Americans knew who Rose, Jackie, Bobby, and Teddy were, and most could identify Bobby's wife as Ethel and Teddy's wife as Joan. But if the first family had become American royalty, its image of perfection would be tainted years later
Right.
by allegations. Sorry, where am I here? Allegations of marital infidelity by the president, most
Mhm.
notably an affair with motion picture icon Marilyn Monroe, and of his association with members of organized crime as well. Ugh. And again, that is not even talking about the sister, who was basically hidden away. But again, that's going to be in a future episode. We can talk about that right now.
Mhm.
So now we're going to dive into, well, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So President Kennedy believed that his Republican opponent in 1964 would be Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona. He was convinced that he could bury Goldwater under an avalanche of votes, thus receiving a mandate for major legislative reforms. One obstacle to his plan was a feud in Vice President Johnson's home state of Texas between Governor John B. Connally Jr. and Senator Ralph Yarburg, both Democrats. To present a show of unity, the president decided to tour the state with both men. On Friday, November 22nd, 1963, he and Jackie Kennedy were in an open limousine riding slowly in a motorcade through downtown Dallas. At 12:30 p.m., the president was struck by two rifle bullets, one at the base of his neck and one in the head. Have you seen the video of him being shot,
No,
Mikel?
I've
No?
seen the video.
Um, I have, not by choice,
Mhm.
but I have. And
Mm.
oh, it's so quick. It's so quick. It's like one minute he's standing and waving, the next he's not. It's insane. And it's an insane thing. Like, I mean, I would implore no one to watch it, but if you happen to fall upon it, it's really breathtaking in not a good way. But it's just this like, I don't even know how you do that with his wife sitting right beside him. It's just I can't imagine. Okay,
That's
so
crazy. Yeah.
it is. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at Parkland Memorial Hospital. The assassination was captured on film by Abraham Zapruder, and his home movie became a key and much disputed piece of evidence. Governor Connally, though also gravely wounded, recovered. Vice President Johnson took the oath as president at 2:38 p.m., so just a couple hours later. Lee Harvey Oswald, a 24-year-old Dallas citizen, was accused of the slaying. 2 days later, Oswald was shot to death by Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner with connections to the criminal underworld, in the basement of um of a Dallas police station. So someone let him in. A presidential commission headed by the Chief Justice of the United States, Earl Warren, later found that neither the sniper nor his killer, quote, was part of any conspiracy, domestic or foreign, to assassinate President Kennedy, but that Oswald had acted alone. I don't know. I don't know,
Mm.
but we'll never know. The Warren Commission, however, was not able to convincingly explain all of the particular circumstances of Kennedy's murder. In 1979, a special committee of the U.S. House of Representatives declared that although the president had undoubtedly been slain by Oswald, acoustic analysis suggested the presence of a second gunman who had missed. And I have heard this theory before, so that's insane. But his declaration did little to squelch the theories that sorry, so there is that Oswald was part of a conspiracy involving either CIA agents angered over Kennedy's handling of the Bay of Pigs fiasco or members of organized crime seeking revenge for Attorney General Bobby Kennedy's relentless criminal investigations. Kennedy's assassination, the most notorious political murder of the 20th century, remains a source of bafflement, controversy, and speculation. John Kennedy was dead, but the Kennedy mystique was still alive. Both Robert and Ted ran for president in 1968 and 1980, respectively, yet tragedy would become nearly synonymous with the Kennedys when Bobby, too, was assassinated on the campaign trail in 1968. Jacqueline Kennedy and her two children moved from the White House to a home in the Georgetown section of Washington. Continuing crowds of the worshipful and curious made peace there impossible, however, and in the summer of 1964, she moved to New York City. Pursuit
Mm-hmm.
continued until October 20th, 1968, when she married Aristol Onassis, a wealthy Greek, you don't say, shipping magnate. The Associated Press said that the marriage, quote, broke the spell of almost complete adulation of a woman who had become virtually a legend in her own time. Widowed by Onassis, the former First Lady returned to the public eye in the mid 1970s, so she's been widowed twice now, as a high profile book editor. And she remained among the most admired women in the United States until her death in 1994. As an adult, daughter Carolyn was jealous of her own privacy, um, but John Jr., a lawyer like his sister, and Debnar, and handsome like his father, was much more of a public figure. Long remembered as John, the 3-year-old was stoically saluted his father's casket during the television coverage of the funeral procession. John Jr. became the founder and editor-in-chief of the political magazine George in the mid-1990s. In 1999, when John Jr., his wife, and his sister-in-law died in the crash of the private plane he was piloting, which has so much controversy around that alone. Um, they made a movie about that actually. I remember like a long time ago. I remember watching a movie about this. It was just there's so much mystique around that too. Um, the event was the focus of the international media watch that further proved the immortality of the Kennedy mystique. It was yet another chapter in the family's curse of tragedy. And we're currently in another tragedy with RFK Jr. So well, yeah, that's it for me.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. This ends this episode of episode 92 of the Next Tape Podcast. Next Tape Podcast is available on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called
Next take podcast.podpage.io.
And Where Else Are We At?
Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast, and Twitter, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Next Take Pod.
You can contact us in our email at mikeltanyka@gmail.com. That is mikeltanyka@gmail.com. So we talked about JFK. So I have one question for you, Tanika.
Sure.
Do you think JFK was a good president, even though we both came from Canada, or we're in Canada?
Well, again, let's not pretend that we're not influenced by what happens in the States, as much as we're trying to distance ourselves right now.
Mhm.
Um, I do think he was a good president. I do think that he stood for good things. I know he was, pretty good advocate for the civil rights movement. You know, he was
Right.
very personable. You know, we hear, I mean, you don't hear a lot of bad things about John F. Kennedy very much. So yeah, I think he was a good president. I think it's unfortunate that his first term, well, his only term, was cut short. And yeah,
Mm,
what do you
okay.
think? Do you think he is a good president?
Oh, I'm not sure. I wasn't born back then, so I wouldn't know
Well,
what he
neither
did.
was
I could
I. What
just
does
do a
that
simple
even mean?
research, but like, yeah, yeah, I know. But like you said, um he might have been a great president. The way how I heard people talking about him, they say he was a good president.
Yeah, I think he's probably
What
one
happened
of
back
the,
then, I just need to do my research
yeah.
on Google and
Hmm.
Google push it. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think he's one of the
Okay.
good
All
people
right.
in the family.
So
So,
that's it. So anything else you want?
no, that's it.
Okay. So I'm Mikel, and
And I'm Tanika.
we're out until
Next week.
next week. All right. Peace.
Bye.